الشيطان اللعين الرجيم يعدهم ويمنيهم وما يعدهم الشيطان إلا غرور. Shaitan makes promises to people and tempts them with hopes, and all his promises are nothing but deception. This is the verse in the Holy Quran regarding how Shaitan is operating and deceiving people. A brief recap of last night's topic. I started by a hadith from the Holy Prophet ﷺ that said regarding Jihad al-Akbar, the greater jihad, and when a battalion of the troops came back to Medina after a battle, the Holy Prophet said that you finished the Jihad al-Asghar, and Jihad al-Akbar is the one that now you are challenged to deal with. They said, Ya Rasulullah, what is Jihad al-Akbar? He said, jihad against your ego and your nafs al-ammar. Because of that verse, I opened the discussion and I covered the three different types of nafs that exist in the Holy Quran with regard to human being. Nafs al-ammara is the lowest level of nafs, which is the commanding nafs that controls our behavior and driven by ego and desire. And it is normally the nafs that Shaitan gets through to control human beings. After coming out of the nafs al-ammara, that hopefully during the month of Ramadan, we should spend some time, see whether we can remove that shackle and the chain that nafs al-ammara has on us, and beginning slowly to come out by changing a little bit, move towards nafs al-lawwama, the blaming nafs, where when we commit a sin or anything, nafs comes back and reprimands us. It says, look, why did you do this? And forces us to really step back and start asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. And ultimately, the highest level of nafs, which is nafs al-mutma'inna, for the elite. This is not something that we can get to it for the time being if we haven't done anything. This moving from nafs al-ammara, which controls us, to nafs al-mutma'inna requires huge amount of struggle and jihad. The concept that the Holy Prophet referred to in Jihad al-Akbar refers to this process that we really need to go through from a stage in which we are controlled and shackled by the material that Imam Hussein sallallahu says, so long as you are servant of the material life, that's the starting point. To be able to come out of it, go to nafs al-lawwama, and from nafs al-lawwama to go to nafs al-mutma'inna, it's a huge path and struggle, uphill struggle that Urafa and mystical figures, they call it sayr and suluk, or spiritual wayfaring. How we go from one stage to another. They break down these levels into small steps that we have to go through it. And normally, those who intend to go through this, they have to go with the help of a master or a teacher, somebody that has gone through this, and they are able to guide you through. This is part of, and I also said that part of this process of moving out from nafs al-lawwama to nafs al-ammara into nafs al-lawwama, we really need self-reflection and constant probing and examination of our deed. حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا, which means you constantly probe your own deed on a regular basis. During the month of Ramadan, more often. Otherwise, we are told by the hadith that at least once a night before you go to sleep, sit down 10-15 minutes and reflect, what have we done? And see if you've done well, then ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. If not, then immediately repent, because before we go to sleep, we may never wake up from the sleep. These are a few of the issues that I spoke about last night. Today, I'm going to change the strategy a little bit. And instead of starting the lecture immediately with the surah, I want to start with some questions. Imagine a hypothetical situation. Imagine if one gets up in the morning, takes a look in the mirror, and sees not what is on the outside, but the mirror suddenly changes its reality and shows who we are from the inside, the spiritual conditions that we are in, the conditions of one's spirit and oneself. The mirror would show everything that is present inside the heart, the soul, the spirit. I think if we want to be honest and suddenly we are confronted with this reality, we will be shocked, distressed, and to realize that how bad we are when it comes to spirituality, how far behind. If the mirror shows our physical reality, and somehow there is, let us say, the computer on the top of the mirror starts telling you and informing us your blood pressure is too high, your cholesterol is too high, you have fatty liver, your kidneys are failing, and the rest. You have diabetes, etc., etc. What happens? We immediately dash to the doctors, and then we start diet, we do exercise, we go through all the necessary things to correct ourselves, particularly if the mirror says you only have 2 days to fix yourself. Correct?
Yes.
What about if the mirror says you have your spiritual and the soul condition is literally diabolical? No, you don't even score on the scale. Then what we're going to do? We don't like it. But at the same time that we cannot deceive we can deceive others, but we cannot deceive ourselves. We know that our spiritual condition is very bad. We are in very bad shape. But when it comes to practical, in the physical sense, immediately you go to the doctor, ask for help, medication, and everything else. But when it comes to to the spiritual condition, we take no action whatsoever. We are not prepared to face the struggle that the hadith last night talked about the jihad. To face the struggle of purifying our spirit while we are prepared to sweat it out with the physical issue. We spend 2 hours lifting weights and sweating it out to reduce the cholesterol and improve the A1C condition, etc., etc. But come and tell me, look, your spiritual condition, your soul is in a bad shape, we don't react. When God, out of God's mercy, creates an environment, call it the month of Ramadan, that our work to correct the soul and the spirit becomes easier than other months. Other month, you needed to struggle uphill. During the month of Ramadan, he says the door to heaven is open. The door to hell is closed. Shaitan is chained. Your sleep is ibadah. You need to help others and so on, and I will reward you amply, multiple times, so that we correct ourselves and we go. Still, we don't move. We come to the mosque, but we treat it as a social place. Just sit down, chat, and anything else. And it's a month of Ramadan. We don't even pay attention that socialization can happen outside the mosque in other places. Let's benefit from being present in the mosque. Second question. It's somehow a follow-up to each other. We all know that paradise cannot be achieved and gained by desire and impulse. I wish to go to heaven. I secured nothing. No heaven, no red carpet, nothing will be given to him. But depends on actual deed. You need to work. Yet, when it comes to Allah and getting closer to Allah, we sin and we belittle the sin. That's the worst part. it's just a minor infraction. We make it small. We lie, it's just a small lie. We backbite, it just, inshallah, Allah will forgive. Backbite, slander, the same thing. Question number 3. Despite the knowledge about the uniqueness of the month of Ramadan and the opportunity for Tawbah, and the fact that Tawbah and repentance is the first step towards purification, we keep delaying it. We don't repent. The verse that I started at the beginning regarding what Shaitan does and creates false hope for people relates to this part here. We keep delaying Shaitan's trick. We keep delaying the Tawbah, we keep delaying other actions, prayers, and everything else. One of Shaitan's favorite tricks is to make people think and say, I will do such a thing soon, tomorrow, in a couple of hours, next week, in a little while, maybe tomorrow, making us delay the necessary action that we should take in improving our spirit and soul for eternity. Why? Because the idea that death could come at any moment is not there. We still think that Allah has granted us 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, and I'll do it tomorrow, 6 years, 10 years from now. You ask them, why don't you do your prayers and fasting that you haven't done? Inshallah soon. Why don't you purify your amwal and wealth? Because ultimately purification of wealth has impact on what you eat. If your food is not halal and purified, it ruins your fast. Inshallah next year. I have to focus on my tax now. I'll do about purification of my mal, amwal, and wealth another time. Why don't you wear hijab? Oh, I'm too young. I will do it when I get older. This is called the great satanic obstacle. What does it mean? That Shaitan puts obstacle in our path by falsely convincing us that there is ample opportunity that you can do it later. There is a hadith both from Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi and أيها الناس إن أخوف ما أخاف عليكم اثنان اتباع الهوى وطول الأمل فاتباع الهوى يصد عن الحق وأما طول الأمل فينسي الآخرة. There are two things that I'm afraid for you as community members. Number one, to follow your desires and ego. Why? Because following the desire would prevent you to see haqq and batil. Remember last night I talked that we are intrinsically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted us that power to discern haqq from batil if the soul, the spirit is purely purified. That exists within us. It's the fitrah. But what happens that we become unable to discern the haqq from batil because of the veils created by our sinfulness. Following the ego ultimately leads us to not seeing haqq. And as I said last night, hadith from the Holy Prophet, there will be a time on my ummah, يَأْمَرُونَ بِالْمُنْكَرِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمَعْرُوفِ. The whole dynamic shift. The paradigm of haqq and batil turns upside down. I see haqq as batil and I see batil as haqq. إن أخوف ما أخاف عليكم اثنان اتباع الهوى. When you follow your ego, your desire, it blinds you. You don't see haqq and batil anymore. وطول الأمل is having long desires that I'm going to stay here long. وأما طول الأمل فينسي الآخرة. I have 80 years. I can do it 6 months, 6 years, 5 years from now. We forget about the hereafter, and we forget that it could happen at any time. Many excuses we give not to discharge our obligation. A trick that Shaitan uses is to misguide us from the right path. Let me finish my study. Let me find a job. Let me get married. Let me any other constantly this putting obstacle in our path, and for us not to be able to do the thing. I mentioned this last night. We are afraid of the tax inspector more than we are afraid of Israel. We prepare everything, clean sheet, everything. There is no debate, no discussion, no question for the tax inspector. But are we prepared when Israel comes to say, okay, let's go, everything is straightforward? Abu Dhar was asked, Ya Abu Dhar, why is it that we are afraid of death? He said, لأنكم عمرتم الدنيا وخربتم الآخرة. What did you do? You spend all of your time for this material life. الناس عبيد الدنيا, that Imam Hussein sallallahu alaihi wasallam is this. We are in chain of this material life. It dominates our psyche. Constantly we think about more and more greed. If I have a house of 1,500 square feet, I need 3,000. If I have 2 cars, I need 3. If I have 1 holiday, I need 2. If I have 1 job, I would even go out of my way to extra job and get extra money to do what? To put it in the bank account at the expense of my children. Because I don't give them quality time. I'm not there. They grow up like mushroom. And then we expect our children to turn out like Salman Farsi. Nothing. We spend too much time distracted from the spirituality. There is no discussion, unfortunately, in our houses these days about spirituality and soul and everything else, about hereafter and accountability. So this is what Shaitan does, constantly puts an obstacle in our path. And then suddenly death comes. There is no time to do anything. We are caught red-handed and by surprise. Amir al-Mu'mineen has a poem. يا من بدنياه اشتغل قد غره طول الأمل الموت يأتي بغتة والقبر صندوق العمل. The one that has been captured, slave of the material life, be warned. And طول الأمل, this long desire that I'm going to stay here for 60 years, 70 years, and I can do things later. Long desire fooled us, blind us with the reality. Why? Because al-maut ya'ti baghtatan, death comes suddenly. And death doesn't recognize young, old, male, female, teenager, adolescents, professors, engineers, doctors, whatever. Doesn't mean. For death, when Israel is commanded to go and take the soul, that's it. فَإِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُمْ, there is no time. Even 1 second back and forth is not going to happen. وَلَمْ تَزَلْ فِي غَفْلَةٍ حَتَّى دَنَا مَنْكَ الْأَجَلِ. You constantly live in deception until the death comes. There's a story about Prophet Sulaiman. They say during his time, how true it is, I don't know, but at least this is being said repeatedly. They say during Prophet Sulaiman's time, Israel used to come down in the shape of a human being and walk between people. And people recognized that this is Malak Israel, Angel Israel. They knew that when he is walking around, he's with a mission, for a mission to take somebody's life. So one of Prophet Sulaiman's followers or disciples saw Israel and got a fright and went to Prophet Sulaiman and said, Ya Rasulullah, I want you to bring Israel in. I want to make a deal with him. He said, okay, we'll bring Israel in. Israel came in Why? What's the matter, Ya Rasulullah? Yeah. He said, this disciple of mine wants to make a deal with you. He said, what is the deal? You give me ample warning before you come and take my life. No problem. Israel left. 25 years later, 20 years later, he comes back and he says, come on, let's go. Hang on a minute. Didn't we make a deal 20 years ago? He said, yes. You didn't give me a warning. No, I did. Many warning I gave you. Let's go to Prophet Sulaiman, discuss this. We go to Prophet Sulaiman, he says, his father died, it was a warning. His brother died, it was a warning. His mother died, it was a warning. His friends died, it was a warning. How many warning this person wants? We tend to conduct our life left, right, and center. We see the warning and we ignore it. And we think that somehow we are immune. That it's not going to happen to me. I have still another 10 years or 15 years to go. In Khutbah Sha'baniyah, the Holy Prophet mentions this. يا أيها الناس إن أنفسكم موهونة بأعمالكم. Your soul is dependent on what you do. Purification of the soul depends on what you do during this month. Just think about it. Under normal circumstance, it's an uphill battle. During this month, so to speak, God bends over backward to provide us with all the facilities to purify ourselves. We don't move. ففكوها باستغفاركم وظهوركم ثقيلة من أوزاركم فخففوها عنه بطول السجود. Your back is loaded with the sins that you have committed. Reduce the weight by prayer, supplication, invocation, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sujood, etc., etc. And your soul is shackled to the deeds that you have. Release it, free your soul, free your spirit by acting more and behaving more. They say that if there is a hadith or a saying that if we can't liberate ourselves during the month of Ramadan, forget about liberation until next Ramadan. And until then, I don't know whether I'm going to stay alive or not. With all the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us during the month of Ramadan, and we still miss it. There is hardly any chance left. Month of Ramadan is a month that we strengthen our willpower. During the day, all the things that were permissible is made forbidden. You resist, your willpower becomes stronger. It's the time to release ourselves from the prison of 11 months of material life and the chain that we have put into. These habits, negative habits that we have been talking about during the previous nights, they must be removed one by one from our soul until we become purified enough to move forward. Ramadan is the divinely educational school where Muslim believers are trained to strengthen their will. And it's the strength of the will that you need to submit, move out of servitude of material life to become Abdullah rather than Abdul Shaitan. That strengthening of the will to shift. The difference between path of Shaitan and path of Allah is literally the direction of your foot, which way you're facing. You either submit yourself to the material life or you change your foot to the other direction and say that I want to submit to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the opportune time. And it will be, this is why the Holy Prophet says, the most cursed individual will be that the person that goes through the month of Ramadan and does not achieve anything beyond the abstention from the food and drink. That's not the purpose. That's the mean. The goal is, as the verse 183 Surah Al-Baqarah, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That's the goal. Everything else is to support you to navigate this minefield of desire and so on. And we send scraps to Allah, some bits and pieces here and there, one prayer that we are not thinking about Allah to Allah, but the rest of the world, nothing. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we really need assistance. Allah is the one, number one, that should help us here. Without Allah's support, no movement can take place. And to awaken us to our responsibility that we have to purify our soul and spirit during this month. Because as I said, if we miss this opportunity, who knows whether we will have another opportunity next year. Eid, one of the this another hadith from from Amir al-Mu'mineen. Eid is a day that you have liberated yourself from sinfulness and you have submitted to Allah. كل يوم لا يعصى الله فيه فهو يوم عيد. You can turn the entire Ramadan into a day of Eid, every day of it, if you don't sin, if you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing special about Eid al-Fitr. Eid al-Fitr simply is a symbol that says, hopefully I struggled during this month and I have achieved some degree of progress that now I can be proud of, celebrate. But if I haven't changed anything, what am I celebrating? I mentioned this input output box in the past. If input and output is the same, nothing changed, then Ramadan has been wasted. May Allah bless you all, and please keep everybody else in your prayer. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, in the sequel of the lecture that you started about the hukuk of namaz, the salah, the rules of the salah, Jamaat salah, how loud should a mamun can recite the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even when doing tashahhud or sujood, or even in the third and fourth salah?
The loudness is dictated by how loud the Imam is reciting his prayers or reciting his du'as. So it has to be below that level.
And when compared to the person who is standing in line.
Yeah, I mean, they have to understand that the one who has responsibility to recite is the Imam, and the loudness that he keeps saying the things, it's something that dictates the level of the other people's loudness. There was one thing else which I wanted to say. The scholars differ regarding whether the rak'ah thalitha, the third and the fourth rak'ah, one should do tasbihat or one should do hamd and surah. The choice between hamd and surah is certainly open for the imam. Imam can either recite hamd in third and fourth rak'ah or tasbihat. But all the scholars, including Ayatollah Sistani, says the Bismillah of even if you choose to recite Hamd, the Bismillah has to be quiet. You can't say it loud. So if you choose to recite Hamd in Rak'at Thalitha or Rab'ah, it has to be quiet. You can't say it loud. But certainly for the Ma'moom, it's recommended to stick to the Tasbihat rather than switch to Hamd. The Imam may have the choice, but generally speaking, all scholars say tasbihat is preferable than hamd. But with regard to the how loud one recite it depends. If the Imam is not too loud, then you have to tune your decibel to bring it lower than the Imam. If the Imam is too loud, then you can increase the decibel a little bit higher and say it a little bit louder. But certainly you have to wait for the Imam to initiate a movement before you initiate a movement. Before the Imam goes to ruku', you cannot go to ruku'. If you do it deliberately, it's batil. So you have to wait for the Imam to go to ruku' and then you go to ruku'. In dhikr of ruku', you go to Imam goes to ruku', you follow. Before the Imam starts Subhana Rabbi al Azim wa bihamdi, you start. It's not acceptable. If you do it by mistake, it's fine. But if you do it deliberately, then it's problematic. There are you go. The best thing is for people. The best thing for people is to go to the sites of their own grand scholars and look at the section about Jama'ah prayer. All of these are listed over there. It's not an issue, a recent issue. Though. These questions have been presented for many years, and all the scholars have answers to it.
That sounds good. And because this question is particularly because when we are standing, if we are like conflicting between the person who is standing next to us and between the imam and us, like I can hear, like for example myself, I can hear both yourself and the person who is standing next to me, and I'm getting confused. So
No, you have to listen to the imam. I mean, the person who stands next to you, as long as he is not louder than the imam, as
but
long
that,
as
if that can like intercede my
as if it
concentration.
interferes with your concentration, then you can talk to the person and say you can bring your decibels a little bit lower.
It's okay, we just listen, Imam. We don't have to recite.
In Hamd and Surah, you don't need to follow, you don't need to recite anything. You should just listen.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, contemplating and reflecting during that time and thinking, it's much better than start to say it and be this somehow deflected from the Hamd and Surah.
And what about the Zohar and Asr? I know that Imam gonna do the.
Yeah, you still Imam is reciting Hamd and Surah, but is reciting it quietly, and
What about the standing one?
that the follower doesn't need to say anything.
Anything. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Whether the Imam says it loud in Salat al-Subh, Maghrib and Isha, or says it quietly in Dhuhr and Asr, Imam is reciting. Because Imam is reciting, that suffices and you don't need to say anything. Hamd and Surah only. But other a'mal, ruku', sujood, qunut, tasbihat, you have to say it quietly, but you have to say it, even when the Imam says it. It's hamd and surah that you don't need to say anything.
What is the ruling on saying astaghfirullah between the two sujood?
That's what I'm saying.
That's fine. I mean, it's a recommendation.
You don't have to say it.
You don't have to say it, no. You don't have to say it, but you can say astaghfirullah.
That makes it disturb.
Sorry, we missed the question. What Ajay?
My question was, what's the ruling on saying astaghfirullah between the two sujood and imam?
It's a recommendation. You don't need to say it. If you don't want to say it, you don't say it. If you want to say it, you can say it. But remember that this is, you have to be aware of it, that this is only a mustahab, a recommendation. It's not part of the salat.
Salat